You really think a few paychecks and some glossy slides make you matter now? Give me a break. You were always the backup plan, kept around in case Garrett screwed up. And even then, you still managed to disappoint me. You were never the future, Sloane. You were the insurance policy we hoped we'd never need. That's what my father said. Calm, cold, like he wasn't crushing the last piece of someone he helped break. If you've ever felt like a stand-in in your own family, like your existence was just a contingency plan, just in case, then this story is yours too. Stay. Because what's coming next isn't revenge. It's reckoning. It was thick, heavier than it should have been. Not the flimsy last-minute kind you pick up from a drugstore rack. No, this one had gold foil edges, the kind of cursive font that screamed curated, and my full name spelled perfectly across the front. Not Sloane with no E, not a nickname. Sloane Whitaker. Like they'd remembered. Like they'd ever cared to. I turned it over 3 times before opening it, half expecting it to burst into flames or whisper something cursed. But all it said inside was, "You are invited to Christmas Eve dinner at the Whitaker home. We'd love to see you again." No love, Mom and Dad. No note, no apology. Just an invitation. I stood there for a while, the card balanced between my fingers like something poisonous. Then I dropped it on the counter and walked away. The rain outside tapped on the windows with the kind of rhythm that used to comfort me. Tonight, it just echoed. My apartment, minimal, pristine, organized within an inch of its soul, suddenly felt too quiet, like the calm before something ugly. The kettle clicked. I poured hot water over my tea leaves, my hands steady. They always were, even when everything else wasn't. The phone buzzed. Haley. I stared at her name for 2 rings, then answered. They reached out to you, didn't they? She asked. Just got the card, I said. They sent one to me too, but I think yours wasn't just for show. She hesitated. Then her voice softened. Sloane. Garrett's in trouble again. Startup stuff. I overheard Jenna ranting about how the pitch needs credibility. That's when I started looking around. Another pause. A breath. I found something. I just forwarded it to you. Check your inbox. My fingers moved on instinct. A new message, subject, Whitaker, AI, investor pitch deck. I opened it. Second slide, co-founder section, Garrett Whitaker, CEO Sloane Whitaker, CTO. I stopped breathing. I scrolled. Fast. There was a summary of our complementary skill sets, a timeline referencing a sibling-founded vision in 2020, a quote supposedly from me. It's not just tech, it's family security. The rage didn't hit all at once. It started small, somewhere in my chest like a splinter I couldn't dislodge. Then it spread. They're using my name, I said flatly. I know. I never agreed to this. I haven't spoken to Garrett in 8 years, Haley finished. I stared at the screen. The projection charts, the fake bios, the arrogance. My voice was cold. He put me on this deck without even asking. Because your name opens doors, she said gently, and his doesn't. I closed the email. The screen went dark. My reflection stared back, hair pulled tight, no makeup, shoulders square. In the hallway next to my closet, there was a box I hadn't touched since 2015, marked in Sharpie. Family, do not open. I stared at it now, then walked over, dragged it into the light, and slit the tape with a pen. Inside, faded photos, old birthday cards with no messages, a sweater I hadn't had the heart to donate. The one from that Christmas when Garrett got a new sled and I got secondhand wool that still smelled like mothballs. I added a printout of the deck to the pile. 8 years. 8 years of silence they broke only because they needed me. Not because they missed me. Not because they cared. I walked back to my desk, sat down, typed, flights to McCall, Oregon. Booked the soonest one that wouldn't look rushed. And as the confirmation email arrived, I knew exactly what I was walking into. The facade, the manipulation, the table I'd once begged to sit at. But this time, I wasn't coming to be fed. I was coming to turn the damn table over. The next morning, I was in McCall, Oregon. The house looked the same, like it had been waiting, rotting, for me. The siding had peeled a little more. The porch light still flickered like it did when I left. And the lawn wore patches of frost the same way it wore our silence. Thin and fragile, but ever present. Christmas lights dangled from the eaves in tangled lines, blinking out of sync, like even the decorations couldn't agree with one another. I stepped onto the porch and hesitated, hand hovering just above the doorknob. For a second, I could hear my own voice from years ago, rising up through memory like a ghost. If I walk out now, don't call when I become someone you can't ignore. No one had. Until now. The door creaked open before I knocked. Sloane, my mother said, blinking like I'd stepped out of a fog. Wow, it's really you. She gave me an awkward hug, her arms stiff, one hand tapping my shoulder like she wasn't sure whether to embrace or release me. You've changed, she said, stepping back. I smiled politely, brushing past her before I could reply. The smell inside hit me like a time capsule. Lemon polish, stale air, and the same bowl of potpourri on the foyer table, now grayer than fragrant. The living room was filled with laughter that slowed when I walked in. A few heads turned. Conversations dropped mid-sentence like someone had pressed mute. Well, look who finally showed up, someone murmured. Is she wearing sweats? Another whispered. I wasn't. My slacks were pressed. The coat draped over my arm was a quiet luxury brand, and my blouse was silk, subtle but exact. They just didn't know what quality looked like unless it screamed. From the kitchen, Garrett emerged with a grin too wide to be real. Everyone, he announced, this is my wife, Jenna. Jenna stepped forward, hand on her pregnant belly like she was cradling royalty. I gave a nod. Congratulations. Jenna tilted her head. Still coding in basements? I met her gaze. Still pretending you understand how servers work? Her smirk twitched, but she didn't respond. Garrett chuckled, loud and performative, and clapped my back like we were war buddies. Good to have you home, sis. Home, right. He turned to Jenna. We set up Sloane's bed, yeah? Oh, Jenna said, eyes widening slightly. Right. Your old room is my office now. You'll be on the couch. Of course. I nodded once and dropped my bag by the foot of the staircase. The couch sat by the drafty window, throw pillows overcompensating for comfort. I sat down, not because I was tired, but because standing felt like staying too long. Dinner came quickly. Too quickly. I barely remembered who said grace or what we were eating. The table was crowded, Garrett and Jenna at the head, their plates already half full. My father asked Garrett about the startup in a tone reserved for war heroes and surgeons. I'm just building something meaningful, Garrett said between bites. You know, legacy. I didn't realize legacy required faking co-founders, I muttered. Only Haley heard. She shot me a warning glance. Conversation swirled without me. Aunts gushed over Jenna's pregnancy, uncles made jabs about inflation and politics. Every time I spoke, someone interrupted. Once, Jenna even reached across me mid-sentence to refill her glass, effectively cutting me off with her wrist. I swallowed a forkful of dry turkey and reminded myself, this was recon, not reunion. Later that night, after most plates had been cleared and the air turned thick with wine and warm exhaustion, my mother appeared at my side with a manila envelope. I know this is random, she whispered, but I'd love your opinion on something. She handed it to me with the same tone she used when giving me expired coupons as a teenager. I opened it. A draft of the family will. My name. Missing. Again. There was Garrett, Jenna, even Haley was listed under godparent consideration, but I didn't exist. She waited for me to speak, perhaps for gratitude or silence, or something she could call mature restraint. I folded the papers slowly, careful not to crease them, then handed the envelope back. I see, I said, my voice calm and even. Nothing's changed. They wrap presents for every single person, and then skip mine like it was a joke everyone was in on. The dining room was lit like a catalog shoot. Flickering candles in tall silver holders, wine glasses sweating onto embroidered napkins, polished cutlery gleaming beside bone-white plates. A soft instrumental version of Silent Night floated through invisible speakers, and someone had placed sprigs of holly on each folded name card. Mine was near the kitchen door. Again. I could see everything from there. Steam rising from the turkey, Jenna's manicured hand on Garrett's arm, the way my father beamed at them as if they were a royal couple. I could also see the presents. Dozens of them, neatly stacked around the tree in the next room, spilling into the dining area like an avalanche waiting to happen. Jenna stood first, wine glass in hand. Before dessert, we thought we'd exchange a few early gifts, she trilled, her voice rehearsed and bright. Just family, of course. Laughter, clapping, phones raised. I sipped my wine and stayed quiet. They started with Garrett's, a drone, a leather-bound journal, a custom mug that said Startup Dad. Everyone cooed. My mother received a silk scarf, imported tea, and a framed print of her wedding photo, restored and color-corrected by AI. She cried. Even Uncle Ron, who hadn't said 2 words to anyone all evening, got a Bluetooth speaker engraved with his initials. Cheers followed each unwrapping. Someone made a toast. And then, everyone looked toward me. Or rather, they didn't. There was a beat. Then 2. Then Jenna laughed. Oops, she said, eyebrows lifted in mock surprise. Looks like Santa skipped you. Garrett chuckled. Classic. She was always dramatic about gifts. I could feel Haley's gaze from across the table, heavy and unmoving. I smiled. Not because I found it funny. Not because I was unaffected. But because I had come prepared. My hand moved slowly, deliberately, reaching into my purse. I laid the first sheet on the linen tablecloth in front of me, a full-color printout of the investor pitch deck. It was flipped open to the second slide. My name, in bold, CTO, a fake quote beside it, attributed to me. Someone at the far end of the table squinted. What's that? Jenna asked, eyes narrowing. I said nothing. I placed the second sheet on top, the draft of the will. No one spoke. Then the third, a copy of my year-end tax statement. The number circled in red. 7 figures, pre-bonus. It was a little theatrical. That was the point. My mother gasped softly. I looked at her, then at Garrett, then Jenna, then my father, whose smile had gone stiff. You forgot my gift? I said, my tone even. That's okay. I brought something you'll never forget. They thought they were mocking me. What they didn't know was, I came armed. No one spoke after I laid the documents on the table. The room held its breath, unsure whether to laugh, pretend it hadn't happened, or wait for me to break the silence with some self-deprecating joke to smooth it all over. I gave them nothing. Candles flickered low in their holders, casting soft shadows across stiff smiles and half-eaten desserts. Forks hung frozen midair. Wine glasses trembled in hands that suddenly didn't know where to rest. I stood slowly, the chair groaning beneath me like it knew this was the moment everything cracked. I wasn't going to say anything, I said quietly, folding the edges of the printout flat. I came here for dinner, not drama, but it seems you've made room for both. Garrett snorted. You're doing this now? Yes, I replied. Now is good. I held up the investor deck. Let's start here. Garrett, you submitted this to at least 3 VC firms last quarter. I know because one of them forwarded it to my company, assuming I'd co-signed. Imagine their confusion when I told them I hadn't spoken to you in nearly a decade. I turned the page slowly so everyone could see my name. The quote. My fake title. Jenna, I said without looking at her. You were CC'd on the email. Did it not strike you as strange that I never replied? She didn't think you'd care, Garrett snapped. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't care until you decided to lie in my name. The printout went flat on the table. I pulled the next document from my bag. Haley's email, screenshot included. Dated, signed. Garrett's name right there, bold as brass. Jenna's email address nestled quietly in the CC line. My mother's lips parted. Sweetheart, we didn't know. You knew, I interrupted. You just didn't think I'd say anything. I reached for the last sheet. The will. Let's read this together, shall we? I opened it and read aloud, voice steady, controlled. To Garrett, the future of this family. I paused, eyes locking on my father. To Sloane, nothing. A ripple went through the room. One of my aunts coughed. Someone's fork clinked against porcelain. Haley didn't blink. I was invisible for 30 years, I said, each word slicing clean. Tonight you'll remember me. I tore the will in half, slow and deliberate, and dropped it onto my untouched dessert plate like a garnish. Garrett pushed back his chair. You think this makes you better than us? I met his eyes, calm, unshaken. Number, I've always been better. I just stopped waiting for your permission. You don't grieve the family you lost. You grieve the illusion you once believed in. The Portland skyline was still gray when I opened my curtains. December 26th, the day after the reckoning. The day after the pretending finally ended. My apartment was silent. Blessedly so. The kind of silence that didn't ask for performance. The kind that welcomed a person home without conditions or scrutiny. Cold light pooled across the hardwood floors. I stood barefoot for a moment, just breathing, as if testing the stillness. No chaos. No clinking dishes or whispered judgments behind closed doors. Just me. My phone buzzed from the kitchen table. I ignored it. Instead, I walked to the coffee maker and pressed the button. The machine whirred to life with a hiss, filling the space with the smell of something strong and grounding. I didn't bother to check who had texted. I already knew. When I finally looked, it wasn't a surprise. Voicemails, missed calls, and one especially long message from my mother. I didn't listen to it. Just read the first few words in the transcript preview. Sloane, I can't believe you embarrassed us like that. Delete. A voicemail from an unknown number. We were joking. Don't take it so personally. Delete. Another. This isn't how family works. Delete. I scrolled. The list seemed endless until Haley's name popped up. I answered without hesitation. Hey, she said, her voice hoarse. So, Garrett got dropped from the McCall Investors Group. Word travels fast. Good, I said, pouring coffee into my favorite chipped mug. Maybe he'll find time to work on his resume. Haley snorted. Jenna had a full meltdown in the grocery store, threw an avocado at a cashier. She always did have a flair for drama. A pause, then a softer tone. You okay? I think so, I said honestly. No regrets. She was quiet. Then, they've been calling me too. Asking if I could convince you to come around. I leaned against the counter. Convince me of what? They're reconsidering the will, she said, voice laced with disgust. Worried now that you'll go public or something. They're afraid. I took a sip of coffee. Let it sit on my tongue. I'm not interested, I said. They can keep it? I already own peace. There was a smile in her voice. I figured you'd say that. After we hung up, I put the phone down, then picked it up again. Contacts. I scrolled slowly. Aunt Linda, delete. Uncle Ray, delete. Cousin Drew, delete. Mom, Dad, delete. Delete. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even emotional. It was surgical, clean, necessary. There was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Ethan stood there, holding 2 coffees and a paper bag with grease stains at the bottom. Didn't want to call, he said, stepping inside. Figured I'd just show up. You figured right. He handed me the coffee and set the bag on the table. No questions, no probing, just presence. We sat on the couch, our knees brushing lightly, steam rising between us. I told him everything. Not in a rush, not for validation, just to let it breathe. He listened. Not one interruption. I kept thinking, I said finally, that if they ever apologized, I'd have this perfectly worded response ready. I rehearsed it as a teenager, you know? All the things I'd say. And now? Now I don't want an apology. I want distance. He nodded once, like that made perfect sense. After he left, I returned to my laptop, opened my employee dashboard, emergency contact form. I clicked edit. Under family, I deleted the old line, typed a new one, Haley Brooks, and hit save. The last time I sat at a family table, I was surrounded by critics. This time, I chose every seat. Warm light spilled from my kitchen fixtures, catching the edges of wine glasses and casting gentle halos on the countertop. The dining table wasn't fancy, just reclaimed wood I'd sanded down myself, paired with mismatched chairs I'd found at flea markets. But tonight, it looked perfect. There was no centerpiece, no place cards, no hierarchy, only laughter. Haley was mid-story, waving a fork in the air while her boyfriend tried to get a word in. Lisa and James were arguing over a board game rule. Ethan stood at the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled like rosemary and butter and intention. And me? I wasn't watching from the edge. I was at the center. This was the dinner I used to dream about when I was 15, alone in the basement while Garrett played host to the world upstairs. A table where I didn't have to earn my seat. A room where people leaned in when I spoke instead of speaking over me. A night with no agendas, just home. We ate off mismatched plates. We drank wine that came with no ratings but plenty of heart. We passed around garlic bread, refilled each other's glasses, and let the night swell with easy joy. After dessert, Haley stood, cleared her throat, and pulled a small rectangular box from her bag. "I wanted to give you this," she said, handing it to me across the table. Inside was a matte black pen. Sleek, weighty, engraved in tiny letters. "Drop your truth like a bomb." I laughed, a real one from the center of my chest. "I figured you needed one that matched your energy," she said, grinning. Ethan waited until the noise settled, then pulled out his own box. No wrapping. Just a leather keychain and a single silver key with a brass tag. Home, wherever you are. "It's a spare," he said. "For the house we'll find when we're ready." I stared at the key for a long moment. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. This was what it felt like. To belong. We raised glasses. Lisa called the toast. "To family," she said. Haley added, "the chosen kind." We clinked. We smiled. And then they asked me to speak. I stood, fingertips brushing the table I had assembled piece by piece, and looked around the room. "You didn't owe me loyalty," I said, "and that's what makes it priceless." No one rolled their eyes. No one laughed too loudly to listen. They just heard me. Later, when the night slowed and the music quieted, I checked my phone. One new email. From Garrett Whitaker. Subject: "We're struggling. Can we talk?" I stared at it for less than a second, then deleted it without opening. This isn't the life they planned for me. It's the one I built when they left me out. There are moments that redefine a life, not through noise or spectacle, but through quiet clarity. When Sloane Whitaker stepped back into that house after 8 years of silence, she wasn't looking for reconciliation. She was testing the weight of old shadows, not hoping for warmth, but verifying that the cold she remembered hadn't softened with time. What she found wasn't surprising, just confirming. The roles were the same, the script unchanged. Her absence had taught them nothing because they never believed she would return with more than silence. But she did. They expected the girl who used to flinch when interrupted, who swallowed her opinions and accepted less because she was told it was her place. What they got was a woman who had stopped asking for permission to exist, to speak, to be acknowledged. And when they tried to erase her again, through omission, through mockery, through carefully crafted lies, she responded not with pleading, but with proof. Sloane didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw accusations across the table or weep for what never was. Instead, she laid down the truth. Documented, dated, undeniable. The investor pitch with her name forged, the will where she was once again erased, the earnings that eclipsed the legacy they tried to build without her. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. A mirror held to their carefully curated delusion, and they cracked under its weight. Garrett's confidence collapsed the moment his fraud was exposed. Jenna, who had mastered the art of passive cruelty, couldn't weaponize charm when faced with facts. The parents, architects of selective love, tried to pivot with the desperation of people who'd realized too late that the quiet daughter had grown teeth. But it was already over. That night, as the remains of Christmas settled into the silence of her untouched dessert plate, Sloane didn't feel triumphant. She felt complete. Not because they had finally seen her, but because their vision no longer mattered. The aftermath was predictable. Guilt-wrapped voicemails, conditional apologies, desperate attempts to negotiate dignity as if it were a transaction. But Sloane had already walked away, long before she ever walked back in. She didn't need to destroy them. They'd done that themselves the moment they assumed she wouldn't come back stronger. Her power wasn't in the exposure. It was in the restraint, in the choice to move forward without dragging the wreckage along. And so, she rebuilt, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. In her Portland apartment, surrounded by people who chose her every day, she found what had been denied her for years: peace without performance, love without conditions, a table where no one sat above her and no one looked through her. That, perhaps, is the quiet victory we rarely celebrate. Not the downfall of those who wronged us, but the decision to stop letting their voices shape our worth. Not the explosion, but the freedom that follows. There are lessons woven into Sloane's journey, lessons carved in silence and tempered in fire. Family isn't defined by blood, but by the people who don't flinch when you speak your truth. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives dressed in receipts, ready to be read aloud. There's a power in walking away, and an even greater one in not turning back. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late. But once it's heard, it echoes through a lifetime. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: when they leave you out, don't just wait to be invited back. Build the kind of life they'll have to knock on to understand, and one you'll never have to apologize for. Because some people inherit their place. But the rest of us? We carve it, one unshakable truth at a time. Before we wrap up, there's one more story I want to share with you soon. And here's a glimpse of it. What happens when the family you trusted turns your loyalty into leverage? Not rejection, not betrayal. Something colder, being treated like a placeholder with a pulse. If you've ever sat at a table that never truly felt like yours, if you've ever been handed silence wrapped in polite smiles, then Rachel's story will hit close to home. The full story will be shared right here soon. And trust me, you'll want to hear what happened when this message popped up. Tomorrow night at 6, something special. Nice dress. Love, Mom. Because that's when everything started to unravel.